I think I cracked Boruto. Well, somewhat. Now, when I say I cracked Boruto, I'm not saying that I cracked every single aspect of the series, although that would be great. I'm still working on it, don't worry. But if I did crack the series, I would have titled the video, I cracked Boruto. But this video is titled Amado and the Sons of Ivaldi Mythology, which is exactly what we're going to focus on today. And you guys know me, when I talk about the mythology for these characters, I like to talk about their past, their present, and also predict their future. So we're going to do that today as well. But before we get into the past, we first need to understand the origins of the character Amado. And when I talk about the origins of the character, I'm not talking about the in-universe origins of the character. I'm talking about what inspired the creation of the character himself. And one thing we do know about characters from Naruto is that most of them are inspired by characters and deities from Japanese folklore. However, I've come to realize something very different when it comes to the Boruto series. It's not taken from the regular fantastical or spiritual aspect of mythology, which would make sense since the series itself is moving in a more scientific or technological era. So instead of leaning into the more fantastical or the more spiritual elements of Japanese mythology, they decided to draw their inspiration from Western civilization or Western mythology, which is normally more science-based in some sense. And when I say Western mythology, I'm talking about Norse mythology specifically. Now you might be asking, how did I draw this conclusion? How did I draw the connection between Boruto and the Norse mythology? Well, it's a very interesting story. So I was sitting here thinking to myself, what does Ada have to do with Amado? Is there a link between Ada? Is she the daughter of Amado? So I said to myself, I need to do some research on this character. And the first thing I did was search up the name Ada, because as we know, the name of a character can somehow give us an idea of what inspired the character or maybe even some of their abilities. And to be honest, I was a little disappointed at first because the name Ada turned out to mean delicate, which doesn't really mean anything. What does that add to the story? What can I draw from the meaning delicate? So I decided to dig a little deeper, and what I found was something very interesting. So the name Ada came from the name Iduna, and Iduna is a goddess in Norse mythology. More specifically, Iduna is said to be the daughter of Dwegar Ivaldi and a Valkyrie named Hildegun. Hildegun was abducted by Ivaldi when she was young and later had at least 2 children by him. One source mentions Iduna having a brother, so we're already seeing the similarities between Iduna and Ada, not just because the name Ada comes from Iduna, but because Iduna also has a brother similar to how Ada has a brother in Daemon. And not only that, we can also compare their physical traits as well, specifically their hair color, because as you can see they have a similar color scheme. Now, since we've established the link between Ada and Iduna and the link between Iduna and Ivaldi, we now need to understand what is Ivaldi. But before we get into Ivaldi, let's read the sentence once again. Iduna is the daughter of Dwegar Ivaldi. Now, what we need to understand is that Dwegar Ivaldi is not a person. Dwegar means dwarf, and Ivaldi is basically a group of dwarves from Norse mythology. Now, it is said that the Norse dwarves were famous for creating unparalleled weapons, jewelry, and other items imbued with extraordinary properties. There are 2 sects of dwarves mentioned in Norse mythology, the Sons of Ivaldi and the dwarf brothers named Brock and Eitri. Side note, if you guys watched Avengers Infinity War, Eitri is the dwarf who created the Infinity Gauntlet and Thor's new hammer called Stormbreaker, so you get an idea of what these dwarves are capable of. It is also said that the Sons of Ivaldi are a union of dwarf blacksmiths and craftsmen who are known for their excellence. They are responsible for creating some of the treasured items in possession of Norse gods, as I mentioned before. But they had competition. Brock and Eitri were brothers who preferred to work independently and were not a part of the Ivaldi dwarf clan, so they referred to themselves as a clan, which is very interesting. So this brings us to what I believe is the past of Amado. I believe that Amado is from a race of aliens that are very submissive to the Otsutsukis. Now, similar to the relationship the dwarves have to the Asgardians in Norse mythology, I believe that this race of people or aliens have that similar relationship with the Otsutskis, and they are in fact responsible for the immense power of the Otsutskis and also the creation of the Karma Seal. This would explain why Amado is able to create cyborgs that have the powers of the Otsutskis and also surpass the power of the Otsutsukis. This would also explain why Amado knows everything about the karma, how to remove it, and also how to reconstruct it. They are in fact the architect behind the power of the Otsutsukis. But how does this tie into the story of Ishiki Otsutsuki? How does this tie into the story of Kaguya Otsutsuki? How would it make sense in the lore of Naruto? I have a theory. Now if we go back to chapter 45 of Boruto titled Defection, Amado explained to Naruto and Sasuke that Kaguya and Ishiki Otsutsuki came to Earth together a long time ago, and their objective was to plant the divine tree to consume the fruit of the planet. But Kaguya suddenly betrayed Ishiki and caught him off guard with an attack that almost killed him, which forced him to basically store himself within a monk called Jigen. Now if we fast forward to chapter 51 titled Sacrifice, when they were fighting Ishiki Otsutsuki, Amado explained that you need to feed a living Otsutsuki to the 10 tails in order for it to bear the chakra fruit, which is very interesting. Which is also backed up by Ishiki not being willing to kill Boruto because he needs him alive, the key word there being alive. Now if we go back to Naruto Shippuden, when Kaguya was first introduced into the anime, we got an anime only episode that basically gave us the backstory for Kaguya. Now this episode was considered filler, but I will say that the anime itself is supervised by Kishimoto, so if they did create a backstory for Kaguya in the anime, I'm sure Kishimoto supervised what they wrote for the character, so we can still use the backstory in the anime, even though it's anime only, to kinda get an idea of what the backstory for Kaguya was. Now what Amado said in this chapter is directly contradicted by what is shown in the anime itself. So what is explained is that Kaguya came to Earth several millennia after the god tree was planted on the planet. So it would make sense for Kaguya and Ishiki to be the ones who planted the god tree unless they planted it several millennia ago and came back for the fruit. That's the only way it makes sense. And another thing that wouldn't make sense is how did Kaguya cultivate the god tree? Because she didn't use Ishiki and she clearly didn't use herself. So how did she cultivate the god tree? Which Otsutsuki did she use? Now people have theorized that she used the lower half of Ishiki to cultivate the god tree, which I did subscribe to a few moments ago until I read the actual manga. Now what Amado says is very telling. He says that you need a living Otsutsuki to cultivate the god tree. You can't use half of a dying Otsutsuki to cultivate the god tree. You need a full Otsutsuki to do so. If that was the case, Ishiki could have cut Boruto in half and then used his body, just like that. But you need a fully alive Otsutsuki to cultivate a chakra fruit. That's what is stated here. So how exactly was this god tree cultivated, and how does it make sense? Who's the one that's telling the truth? The anime in Naruto Shippuden or Amado in Boruto? I think what happened in Naruto Shippuden makes more sense, and it's not really a plot hole. I'm gonna tell you why. Now if you look at it objectively, Kaguya came to Earth as shown in the anime after the tree was planted. She came to observe the fruit and also collect it to bring it back to the Otsutsukis. This would mean that the tree was cultivated before Kaguya got to the planet, which would mean that another pair of Otsutskis cultivated the god tree. And this connects back to the Boruto manga as well, because as shown when Sasuke went to the Ten Tails dimension, it showed a pillar that had 6 Otsutskis, and it showed them in a particular order. So from right to left you had the 2 Otsutskis that are unknown with their pillars destroyed, and then you have Kaguya and Ishiki, and then you have Momoshiki and Kinshiki. So it's basically showing them in order of which they came. So you had the first Otsutskis, then you had Kaguya and Ishiki, and then you had Momoshiki and Kinshiki. So what this means is that the 2 Otsutskis that came to Earth before Ishiki and Kaguya, they were the ones who planted the god tree and sacrificed one of their partners to the god tree in order to cultivate the chakra fruit. Then those Otsutskis moved on to another planet to plant another god tree. So I believe that you have a set of different Otsutskis. So you have the Otsutskis who are sent to plant the god tree, then you have the Otsutskis who are sent to retrieve the god tree, and then you have Otsutskis who are sent to scout planets. That would be Urashiki Otsutsuki. Now as I said earlier, Kaguya and Ishiki were sent to the planet to guard the chakra fruit and collect it when it had amassed all the chakra from the planet. But that didn't happen. Ishiki himself was planning a rebellion against the clan because he wanted to amass all the chakra fruits for himself to become an Otsutsuki god to become a unique species, as he explained to Code. So Amado had no intentions of going back to the Otsutsuki clan. He had no intentions of returning with the chakra fruit. He wanted the chakra fruit for himself to become the Otsutsuki god. So when leaving the planet, he took one of the dwarves with him because they are the architect behind the power of the Otsutsuki, so he needed one of them to travel with him just in case he needed their expertise. Now I'm not sure if Amado was a willing participant or if he was forced against his will. That's up in the air, but it could be that Amado went with Ishiki because Ishiki promised him that he would revive his daughter using his wishing ability. Of course, after he obtains the chakra fruit. Now I know Amado said that his daughter died 12 years ago, but that could be a lie. But yeah, that's a stretch, but that's just an idea. Now when I say that the dwarves are basically the architect behind the power of the Otsutsuki, I'm not saying that they are basically responsible for everything the Otsutsukis are able to do. I do believe that the Otsutsukis have certain abilities that are innate to them. So it could be a case where certain abilities that they do possess are given to them by the dwarves, but it could be that they also have abilities innate to them, which should be like Ishiki's wishing ability. So that's not something Amado can replicate. Now you might be wondering, if they were sent together to the planet, how did they end up separating, and how did Ishiki end up arriving after Kaguya, and how does that make sense? Now as I said earlier, Ishiki was planning a rebellion and Kaguya could have been in on it as well, and she ended up betraying Ishiki because she fell in love with the people on the planet and she didn't want to kill all of them, because as we learned later on in the series, Kaguya did end up releasing people from the Infinite Tsukunomi because she didn't want them to die out. She still wanted the human race to survive, and she knew that Ishiki wanted to wipe the planet clean using the God Tree so he can absorb the power of the planet. So she betrayed Ishiki when he arrived on the planet using the power of the chakra fruit, because remember, Kaguya came to the planet before Ishiki, so Kaguya obtained the chakra fruit without Ishiki's knowledge. So she could have caught him off guard with her newfound powers, which is how she was able to destroy him. Well, somewhat. Then the story would play out exactly how Amado said it played out. Ishiki shrunk to a very small size, then flew into the brain of Jigen and controlled him, and then gave him the karma. So that's basically what I think happened in the past. Now that's a wild theory, I know, and it might sound like fan fiction to a certain degree, but I really do believe that it makes sense in the way how I said it played out. And yeah, I should have probably saved that for another video, but you know, it is what it is. Now, what I think is happening right now is that Amado has decided to betray Ishiki for whatever reason. We don't know what for. It could be that Ishiki said something or didn't do something that was promised, or he just changed his mind and found out that he can do it a better way by, of course, putting the karma on Kawaki and then fulfilling his plan to have his wish granted through Kawaki instead of through Ishiki, because he can't trust Ishiki. And as I said earlier, I do believe that Amado's end goal is wishing his daughter back to life. So I think that's what his present goal is. Now for the future predictions of Amado, I think his plan will fail. I don't think he'll be able to resurrect his daughter through Kawaki. I think Kawaki is going to go down a completely separate route, and he might end up killing Amado. Those are just my thoughts. Now before I close the video, I just want to say one thing. I did make a video previously talking about why I think Ada is Amado's daughter, so if that wasn't clear in this one, you guys can go check that video out. I don't think I need to re-explain that. I basically just said that because her ability doesn't work on blood relatives, and Amado could be a blood relative because the ability didn't work on Amado, and I don't believe he's an Otsutsuki, right? So I went in depth, you guys can go check it out. So yeah, but as I said, I don't believe he's an Otsutsuki, but it's still possible, right? It could be a case that Amado is one of the missing Otsutsukis, and Amado did come to Earth with Ishiki because he also betrayed the clan. Or it could be a case that Amado is from a separate race of people. He is one of the Sons of Ivaldi, but he has no relation to the Otsutsukis whatsoever. It could be a case that Amado is from a planet where the Otsutskis went and, you know, did the God Tree thing and absorbed the planet, killed a bunch of people, and also killed Amado's daughter. It's possible. And, you know, he's here trying to exact his revenge on the Otsutskis and whatever through Ishiki, and also gaining the power of Ishiki. Because I have one theory, I do believe that Amado, even though he's trying to get Kawaki to basically use these powers and basically wish his daughter back to life, I do also believe that it's possible that he wants to take over Kawaki's body and use the power for himself. So as we know, Amado is able to reconstruct, create, and also dissipate the karma. So he should be able to also create a karma for himself to implant on Kawaki. And I do believe that that 20% that's left for Kawaki is where he'll fit in his DNA to basically complete the process. So those are just my thoughts, winging it in the end, because yeah, this video is too long. But yeah, if you guys like the video, drop a like. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, and yeah, hit that notification bell to be notified when I post new content. But above all else, have a great day. Peace out.
There's no question who's the expert. You've definitely earned these.